The house stood alone, dark, silent, menacing. Locals called it Blackwood Manor. They whispered tales about it, stories that chilled their bones and made their blood run cold. It was a place of shadows and secrets, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. Some said the house was cursed. Others said it was haunted by restless spirits. But all agreed on one thing. Blackwood Manor was a place to be feared, a place where nightmares came true. Olivia stared at the house. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had always been a fearless girl, but something about Blackwood Manor sent shivers down her spine. "You chicken?" A voice broke through her thoughts. It was Jake, her best friend, his face illuminated by the moonlight. "No way," Olivia retorted, her voice barely a whisper. "It's just an old house." Jake had dared her to spend the night in Blackwood Manor. He didn't believe the stories. Olivia didn't want to seem scared, so she agreed. A low groan echoed through the house as they pushed open the creaking door. The air inside was heavy and cold, thick with the scent of dust and decay. Cobwebs clung to every surface like ghostly shrouds. "See? Nothing to be scared of," Jake said, his voice unnaturally loud in the silence. Olivia wasn't so sure. She felt a presence in the house. Something unseen watched them from the shadows. An icy wind suddenly slammed the door shut with a deafening bang. Olivia jumped, her heart racing. She wanted to leave now. They explored the house, each room more decayed than the last. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting and turning in the flickering light of their torches. Olivia kept hearing noises, soft whispers, floorboards creaking. But every time she spun around, there was nothing there. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, grabbing Jake's arm. He shrugged. "It's just the wind." But his voice lacked conviction. As they reached the end of the hallway, Olivia saw it. A tall, shadowy figure that vanished into a room just as they approached. They entered a room dominated by a large portrait of a stern-looking man. The room was dimly lit, with shadows dancing on the walls, giving the entire space an eerie ambience. The portrait seemed to be the focal point, drawing their eyes immediately. His eyes seemed to follow them as they moved. It was as if the man in the painting was alive, watching their every step with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. Olivia felt a strange chill, as if the air itself had turned icy. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the cold that seemed to seep into her very bones. The temperature in the room had dropped noticeably. "Creepy," Jake muttered, staring at the portrait. He looked familiar. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen the man before, perhaps in a dream or a distant memory. The familiarity was unsettling. Suddenly the portrait swung back, revealing a hidden passage behind it. The sound of the portrait moving was almost mechanical, like gears turning in an old clock. The hidden passage was dark and foreboding. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She had not expected the portrait to move, let alone reveal a secret passage. Her heart raced as she tried to process what was happening. Who else knew about this secret room? Olivia wondered. The house had been abandoned for years, yet this passage seemed well maintained. It was as if someone had been using it recently. They cautiously entered the passage. The air grew colder. Each step echoed off the stone walls, amplifying the sound in the narrow space. The darkness seemed to close in around them, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Olivia felt a presence behind them, a feeling that they were being watched. She turned back, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The feeling was so strong it was almost tangible. The portrait was back in its place. It was as if it had never moved. The stern-looking man continued to stare out from the canvas, his eyes as piercing as ever, but the man in the painting was gone. The frame was empty, the canvas blank. It was as if he had stepped out of the painting and into the real world. Olivia and Jake exchanged a look of disbelief, their minds racing with questions and fear. Section 6. A blood-curdling scream. The passage led to a dusty old library. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and neglect. Dust particles floated lazily in the dim light, disturbed only by the occasional draught that whispered through the room. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Each tome seemed to hold secrets long forgotten, their spines cracked and titles faded. The sheer number of books was overwhelming, a testament to the knowledge and stories that had been left to decay. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the room. The warmth of the flames was a stark contrast to the cold, eerie atmosphere that permeated the library. But the fire wasn't what sent chills down Olivia's spine. Her heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the room, feeling an unshakable sense of dread. In the middle of the room, a figure sat in an armchair facing away from them. The figure's presence was unsettling, an ominous silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around it. They were shrouded in a dark cloak, their features hidden in the shadows. "Hello?" Olivia's voice trembled, barely more than a whisper. The figure didn't move, remaining eerily still, as if it were a statue. She took a step closer, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Each step felt heavier than the last, her fear growing with every inch she closed between herself and the mysterious figure. And that's when she heard it. A sound that made her blood run cold. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the house. It was Jake. Olivia spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Jake was gone, vanished. Panic surged through her as she frantically searched the room, her eyes darting to every shadow and corner, and the figure in the chair was gone too. The cloak lay draped over the armchair as if the figure had simply melted away into the darkness. Olivia's mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing in with the weight of the unknown. She backed away slowly, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The library, once a place of knowledge and refuge, now felt like a trap, a labyrinth of shadows and fear. Her hand brushed against a dusty book, the contact grounding her for a moment. She had to find Jake. She had to get out of this nightmare. With a final glance at the empty armchair, Olivia turned and ran, her footsteps echoing through the deserted library. The flickering firelight cast her shadow long and distorted against the walls, a haunting reminder of the figure that had vanished. She burst into the hallway, the lights flickering ominously above her. The scream still echoed in her ears, a chilling reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. Olivia's fear was now mixed with determination. She would find Jake. She would uncover the truth behind the blood-curdling scream and the vanishing figure, no matter what it took. Section 7. Olivia's disappearance. Panic surged through Olivia. "Jake!" she called out, her voice echoing in the silence. No answer. She ran through the house, her heart pounding in her ears. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every creak of the floorboard sent shivers down her spine. She searched every room, every corridor. But there was no sign of Jake. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Olivia was trapped, alone, in the haunted house. And then she heard it again, her name whispered on the wind, Olivia. Section 8. The Search Party. The sun began to rise, casting a pale light over Blackwood Manor. The manor, with its towering spires and broken windows, looked even more menacing in the early morning light. Shadows danced across the overgrown garden, and the air was thick with an eerie silence that seemed to swallow every sound. A search party gathered at the foot of the hill, their faces etched with worry. Jake was missing. The group consisted of friends, family, and a few brave volunteers from the town. They exchanged nervous glances, each person silently hoping for a miracle. He hadn't returned home after daring Olivia to spend the night in the haunted house. Olivia's parents were frantic. They had spent the entire night pacing, their minds racing with fear and regret. They had warned her about Blackwood Manor, the place where countless ghost stories originated. They had warned her about Blackwood Manor. The tales of spirits and unexplained disappearances were not just stories to scare children. They were real, and everyone in the town knew it. But Olivia, with her adventurous spirit, had brushed off their concerns, told her the stories were true. But she hadn't listened. She had always been the brave one, the one who laughed in the face of danger. But now, as the search party stood at the entrance of the manor, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone. The search party entered the house, their voices echoing in the stillness. The air inside was cold and musty, filled with the scent of decay. Every creak of the floorboards sent shivers down their spines. They called out for Olivia and Jake, but their voices seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. They searched every room, every nook and cranny. The manor was a labyrinth of forgotten memories, with rooms filled with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. They opened every door, peered into every shadow, but there was no sign of the two teenagers. But there was no sign of Olivia or Jake. The search party's hope began to wane as the hours passed. The manor seemed to mock their efforts, its silence a constant reminder of the danger that lurked within its walls. They knew they couldn't give up, but the fear of what they might find or not find was overwhelming. As the search continued, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The manor was not just an old abandoned house, it was a place of darkness and despair. And somewhere within its walls, Olivia and Jake were waiting to be found. Section 9. The final clue. As they were about to give up hope, they found it. A single shoe lying in the middle of the library floor. It was Olivia's, and next to it, scrawled on the dusty floor in what looked like blood, was a single word: run. The house stood silent, watching, waiting. The nightmare was far from over.